Good evening and welcome to this live video chat. My name is Jaie Avila. I'm a reporter with the News 4 I team in San Antonio. And today we are talking about a story that I did for News 4 that focuses on the Migrant Resource Center here in San Antonio. And that is a center that was set up in July of 2022 to handle many of the immigrants coming over the southern border. And many of them are en route to other cities in the United States, but they are using San Antonio as a stopover, a place where they can basically settle in for a few days and make travel plans to go to other cities in the United States where perhaps they have relatives or friends. And under the current situation, there has been an increasing flow of immigrants coming up that we certainly have been trying to keep everyone up to date on. We've had many reporters down in the border area and reporting on how the border towns are handling the influx of people coming across. But we didn't want to neglect the situation going on here in our own backyard in San Antonio, which has hosted thousands of immigrants from Central American countries in recent years. And of course, this year it's been growing. And just to give you some background, they actually set a record the last fiscal year, which was technically fiscal year 2023, which just ended, and 2.4 million border encounters is what they're reporting, Customs and Border Protection. And so that's a new record. The volume is immense. It has been a tremendous strain on towns around the border. And of course, we've heard from the larger cities where many of these immigrants have gone on to New York, Chicago. Sometimes they're going on their own. Sometimes they're being bused by different political leaders, everyone from the Biden administration to Governor Abbott to other governors like Ron DeSantis have, to one extent or another, sent immigrants to other cities. But it hasn't just been that. City of El Paso, city of San Antonio has paid for the travel in some cases for some of these folks to move on to other cities. And so what I'm looking at right now are some comments here that I'm going to try and, as I discuss the story, I'll try and answer some of these questions if I can. So Brian is asking here, I just don't see why San Antonio allows the use of so many resources, but can't help fight homelessness. And that's a big question. Obviously, homelessness has been growing here. It's kind of a parallel problem happening. I think the way that they would explain it in my discussions with those in San Antonio on these stories with San Antonio city government is that they are looking at these immigrants as people who are going to be passing through our city anyway. And so the city wants to not only extend some kind of compassionate help, but also try to be organized in the way that they help these folks set up their travel plans and move on. And that costs money. An important part of the stories that I've been doing is to keep following up and making sure that the money San Antonio has been spending has in fact been reimbursed from the federal government, which has been the promise from the beginning. So I'm going to reset a little bit here because I have some people asking what we're talking about. We are talking about the Migrant Resource Center here in San Antonio. I'm Jaie Avila, investigative reporter with News 4 I team. And we have done a story for today, an investigative story about how the city has spent $9.3 million on the Migrant Resource Center this year. That's from January to the end of October. We were able to get those amounts through an open records request. And this was for basically utilities and cleaning up at that facility, which is at 7000 San Pedro, the Migrant Resource Center. It's an old CPS Energy building. If you drive by on San Pedro, you can't miss it. There are tons of people, families, single individuals milling about, walking up and down the stretch there. And that's been going on since July of last year. The city tells me that, yes, in fact, they have been reimbursed by FEMA for all 9.3 million that they've spent this year. And just going out to that facility, you can see that it's jam-packed every day. This is a question from Irene. How is this happening if Biden says the border is secure? Well, that's the big question everyone wants to know, isn't it? Because I think all these political leaders have debate over what they consider secure, what they consider closed. I'll tell you one thing. I talked to one of the immigrants from Venezuela. The vast majority of these folks are coming from Venezuela, the ones arriving in San Antonio. And he was saying that he is indebted to the Biden administration because he really thinks that that they're helping out Venezuelans who are fleeing a horrible situation. And he was someone I interviewed for my story, my report that aired tonight. We'll probably show that again in a few minutes. Isn't it illegal to help a migrant, is what Joey has asked. And the answer is obviously no. There is no enforcement of that kind of thing. In fact, these are organized efforts by not just the federal government, but by local cities, including San Antonio, to basically allow people who are seeking asylum, and that's what it comes down to, is in the past, other administrations would not have considered many of these folks to be valid asylum seekers because they aren't fleeing a direct conflict or danger or persecution. But all the folks coming from these countries like Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua, those are the top three countries for San Antonio. These immigrants coming up from those areas are, and they'll tell you, they're fleeing some hostility, but it's also an economic thing. And well, if you stick to the very strict definition of what asylum is, it's not for people fleeing economic hard times. You're supposed to be fleeing a situation where you're physically in danger. Now, what's on the screen right now, this is actually part of the city of San Antonio's dashboard. It's called the Migrant Dashboard, and you can find that. You could just, type into your search engine, City of San Antonio Migrant Dashboard, and this will pop up, and it kind of tells you, this page in particular here tells you what countries migrants are coming from into San Antonio. The two main places that San Antonio will shelter immigrants coming in to the city are this Migrant Resource Center. The vast majority of them go there, but also some are at the airport. And another page of this dashboard tells you how many are, and you'll see at the bottom of the screen there for a moment, we had the link to this dashboard. And there's another page right there that tells you how many arrivals. The dark blue bars are how many people arrived in the last 30 days each day to the Migrant Resource Center, and then the light blue bar at the top is how many arrived at the airport, and the combined figure was 930 for today. Here's a question from Brandon. We don't care where they're coming from. There are many ways to do it legally. It really upsets the migrants who have done it the right way. And then he says, call it what it is, illegal aliens. So he, of course, is talking about this long ongoing debate of how fair is it to people who are going through the very lengthy and somewhat difficult and involved process of seeking asylum through the normal channels instead of coming up through the border and presenting yourselves to Border Patrol, and then going through this process, which right now it's pretty much they put them on buses to San Antonio or other destinations that where they have organizations like Catholic Charities that have agreed to help them make travel plans to move on to another city. And either here in San Antonio or in the city they're going to, they will have to go to court dates before judges to determine if they will be granted asylum. Brandon is asking, they're all over the San Pedro area and making it hard to do business in that area. And I did a story last year of a business owner. He wanted to remain anonymous, but he was right there across from the Migrant Resource Center. And he was essentially saying that. He said in the beginning, he was all for it, thought it was a good idea, but the sheer numbers have been so great, and there are so many people that are lingering around and hanging around outside the center and on the street corners and on the street. And the problem is many of them have run out of money by the time they get to San Antonio. And so they're asking passersby for money, and he was upset because they were asking customers for money, and that's definitely happening. We witnessed that happening when we were out there. So it is a part of agreeing to handle this type of volume, which the city of San Antonio has decided to do. Now, we reported last year that the city was actually buying plane and bus tickets, about $728,000 worth of plane and bus tickets for migrants. But shortly after we did our report, the city told us that they were no longer doing that. Now, Catholic Charities may be still buying tickets for migrants, but they can't afford tickets for everyone. And one of the immigrants that I met yesterday was trying to figure out how he was going to buy his own ticket. Elizabeth asking, I'm glad to see San Antonio temporarily caring for the immigrants who are here the right way and getting reimbursed by the federal government. The vast majority of us are descendants of those who came here from other lands. So supporting the refugee programs today is merely repaying the debts incurred by our own ancestors long ago. So obviously, just like in many parts of the country, here in San Antonio, you have differing opinions as to about what the city has decided to do, and whether it's a proper use of tax money. And that is something that we've had to bring out, is that yes, it is federal money, but it's still taxpayer money that is going towards this. It's just not coming out of San Antonio's general fund because FEMA has agreed to reimburse. Let's see here, Larry asking, how do you know what country these people come from? I understand many, if not all, have no proof of who they are. Well, that is something that on the dashboard, the city's migrant dashboard, they're putting that information on there. So obviously, as part of their intake into the Migrant Resource Center, either folks with the city, more likely folks with Catholic Charities, are interviewing them, finding out where they came from, and whether they're actually asking for any kind of proof or identification, I don't know. Again, here you see on your screen some pages from the migrant dashboard. Here's the page that tells you that most of the immigrants coming into San Antonio are coming from Venezuela, and then Cuba, and then Nicaragua, but many other cities, you can see them listed there as well. And you see all kinds of folks when you're out there. You see family groups, you see individuals, but it's a very crowded place right now, and there's not enough room inside the Migrant Resource Center. And so people are crowded outside and having to sit in chairs, and at least they're protected. There's a lot of police presence to keep them safe. And there's places to use the restroom and rest temporarily while they try and figure out how they're going to get to their next destination, because it takes more money, and many of them have paid out all they have just to get this far. And we did have one immigrant yesterday telling us that they're getting a very different message down in Venezuela than what you're hearing from political figures, elected officials here in the United States. They're hearing, hey, it's wide open, go. The Biden administration is welcoming you, go on up. And it's only after they start to make the trek that they realize that that it's very difficult, very dangerous, and that it's not as simple as just walking across the border. Joey, why are there not educational centers in border areas to start a new way of crossing? Well, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not quite sure I understand it, but my reporting today at least, has focused on what's going on here in San Antonio. The border towns, of course, are kind of handling things their own way, but ultimately the Customs and Border Protection is in charge of this operation. When does this stop? When is it going to be too many people flooding our country? Well, that's a big question. The Biden administration is under a lot of pressure to answer that question, certainly. They have introduced a few months ago the app for a way that people can basically get an appointment to seek asylum using an app, and that has been used, but the number of people using the app are just a small fraction compared to those who are just continuing to cross the border. They're coming from these faraway countries, a lot of the times on foot, and they're paying people to drive them certain distances. And then there's a train in Mexico that many of them get on. That's in my report, and it takes them up to the border with the United States. Let's see here. So trying to look at some of the questions here as they come up. Let's go ahead and do this for those who may be joining. We're going to play my investigative report that aired tonight on News 4 in San Antonio, so you can kind of get the context of what we're talking about specifically this evening. So let's go ahead and play that.
According to records we obtained from the city of San Antonio, it spent $9.3 million to run the Migrant Resource Center from January of this year through the end of October. Now that includes staffing, transportation, and the costs of cleaning and maintaining the facility. The Migrant Resource Center on San Pedro in a former CPS Energy building is now bursting at the seams, with hundreds of newly arrived immigrants forced to crowd around the outside of the facility.
They only help us for 5 days. Once that is over, they send us off to the streets.
Magdiel Maican tells me he's from Venezuela and walked for days through the Panama jungle on his way to the U.S. border. He shot this cell phone video of him riding on top of a train through Mexico on his way to the border with Texas. Now, Maican says he's stuck in San Antonio with little money and no job, and eventually hopes to move on to Dallas.
Estaré en San Antonio aproximadamente. I will be in San Antonio for 6 to 7 months while I fix my immigration status.
Last year, when the city first opened the Migrant Resource Center, Mayor Ron Nierenberg said the cost of operating it would not impact the city's budget.
This entire operation is 100% reimbursed by the federal government.
The city says that's still the case. The city has been reimbursed for expenses from May through September 2023. We are submitting reimbursements for October expenses to FEMA. Last year, we reported the city had spent $728,000 on plane and bus tickets for immigrants, but the city told us it has stopped paying for travel. Catholic Charities has partnered with the city to run day-to-day operations at the center. For the News 4i team, I'm Jaie Avila.
So that is our latest report that we aired tonight on News 4. And we have done previous stories all last year after they opened up the center. And initially, we were reporting on the amount of money that the city was spending to actually buy plane and bus tickets for immigrants who were coming to the center. That ended up being $728,000 last year that was spent. They say that that too was reimbursed by the federal government. But then they told us that they were going to stop that practice of buying the tickets, and that they haven't done that since, and that the money, the $9.3 million they spent this year, was for basically the transportation to the airport in those small buses, and also security and different upkeep and utilities for the building. Sheila asking, curious who is giving Catholic Charities so much money to be able to give these immigrants money, food, transportation to wherever they want to go. And since the city said that it quit giving the money for transportation. And that is true. When we did the story last year, the $728,000 that was given for plane tickets and buses by the city, some of that, I believe it was $200,000, was kind of funneled through Catholic Charities. And I think that has continued to happen to a certain degree, because I noticed that in the latest figures the city gave us, another $300,000 this year was given from the city to Catholic Charities. So that's $500,000 total. And we know at least some of that was used for plane tickets and bus tickets. We asked what determines whether they pay for an immigrant's travel, and they said that that was something that Catholic Charities was deciding on a case-by-case basis. Let's see here. I'm trying to see if there's any other comments we have. Can you see an allocation of those funds? I have no problem. I think it would be a good idea for us to post and show you what we were provided by the city. It's not terribly detailed. It really only breaks it down into major categories. Like I was saying, transportation. It was also it said staffing, which obviously continues to be security, because there's a lot of police around there, and private security, and also utilities and maintenance. So I guess it's the last call. If there's any last questions for me before we head out, I really appreciate you joining this live video chat about our investigative story on the Migrant Resource Center. It's going to be an ongoing operation, and we're going to keep a close eye on it, and let you know exactly how much the city is spending on it, and if the federal government stops reimbursing them, or if they decide to open more centers, we'll update you with that. But for now, thanks to everyone for supplying the comments and the questions, and we will continue to cover this issue in the future. Have a good night.